The other question that patients will often ask is, what day do I get my hormones tested? Now, for thyroid, it doesn't really matter. It needs to be first thing in the morning, and you do that generally fasted. But when it comes to sex hormones and doing a full female hormone panel, you definitely want to do this on cycle day 21 or 7 days after ovulation. So 7 days after ovulation is important because then we can capture progesterone, and we can't capture that at any other time because you haven't ovulated yet. Actually, let's just quickly unpack that. When you're about to ovulate, you have lots of smaller follicles sitting on your ovary, and usually one dominant follicle that's stimulated by two things: follicle stimulating hormone throughout the first part of the cycle, and then luteinizing hormone is triggered, and that's actually what sets off ovulation to happen. When that follicle is triggered and then it kind of breaks away from the ovary, what's left is a little site that becomes a gland, and that gland is what is stimulating your progesterone or making progesterone in your body. Without ovulation, you're not getting any of that. Therefore, you can't test progesterone on day 2 because your body's stopped making it at that point in time, or it should have stopped making it at that point in time. So this is super important for us to have this picture to understand. Sometimes, if we don't need to capture progesterone for fertility purposes, we might test on cycle day 2, usually to test follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone as well. We want them to be proportionate to each other. The follicle stimulating hormone is at 4. We want to see luteinizing hormone around 4. It does go up at ovulation. I don't want to confuse anyone. Day 21 is the most ideal day for your general female hormone blood panel. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't test them. It's so lazy to suggest that because they're changing every day that there's no point in testing. That is the laziest thing I've ever heard. This is why I love having information of time gone by, because we can compare. Oh, that's my other point. You do want to create as little variables as possible. So I would actually say, even though thyroid isn't dependent on your menstrual cycle, test on the same day. Let's just say, for example, because you're already testing other hormones on day 21, maybe consistently do your thyroid testing on day 21. I encourage you to use the same pathology lab. I encourage you to do it at the same time. Really try and mimic the exact same environment each time so that you actually have less variables and there's less questions that we can kind of go, oh, is that a result of X, Y, or Z? And there is other testing, a dry urine test or a Dutch test for hormones, which can be really great. It is expensive. That's the one thing. Whilst it gives you a more complete picture and can tell you a lot more about what's happening, often for patients, especially if we need to test frequently, I will start with a blood test. Now, that's not necessarily a popular opinion against my colleagues, but because I am so driven by symptoms, I kind of don't mind using the blood test. It does generally give me everything that I need. If you want to do deeper testing, the Dutch test is a great idea, but it's not a starting point for me. I'd rather you spend time and energy on doing the right things: lifestyle, nutrition, supplements, acupuncture. I'd rather you spend that money there, because 9 times out of 10, we don't need a Dutch test. A saliva test, also quite questionable amongst various industries. I don't dislike the saliva test. I quite like it. I think you've just got to be consistent. Don't test saliva 1 month and then blood test 3 months later. I don't think it's going to be as accurate, I should say. Pick one and stick with it. A lot of people will argue that the saliva test is more accurate than a blood test. Some will say it's not. Like I said, I don't dislike it. I've done them myself. They're easy. They don't require you to actually have your blood drawn, and so that's why they can also be a great option. However, it's not appropriate for thyroid. The only way we can test thyroid is through blood test. Also, finally, cortisol. Should I say it's misunderstood. You can't just take a snapshot of cortisol and then be able to know what someone's cortisol is doing. This is where a Dutch test can be very useful, because it will test cortisol over the course of a 24-hour period, not just once when that blood test's taken. So if you're testing it with blood tests, you're only taking that at one point of the day, unless you were to test across 4 times of the day. But I don't know who's lining up for a blood test 4 times in a 24-hour period unless you really, really have to. The Dutch test can be great to look at what your cortisol is doing over the course of a 24-hour period and really give you an accurate window into what is actually happening for you.